respectfully submits that it has established by the evidence presented that the Jamaican state is in gross violation of its international obligations, more particularly set out on page 21 of our report, as it relates to the protection of the rights of children in its care. While the government has in fact established requisite legislation in conformity with some of its international obligations, it has failed in their effective implementation. Most notably, the Jamaican state failed to guarantee the most basic right, the right to life of the children who perished in the Armadale fire, and indeed of other children, such as those who perished at the SOS Children's Village in similar circumstances where they died then of asphyxiation. Quite apart from bearing responsibility for the events which led to the deaths themselves, the startling admission of firemen who attended on the scene at Armadale was that no checks were made to ascertain whether the girls assumed to be dead were in fact dead. And indeed, later revelation from one of the doctors revealed that one of the girls may in fact not have been dead at the time. This clearly demonstrates the state's failure at every level in gross violation of Article 4 of the American Convention and Article 6 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The breach of the right to life is even more egregious in light of the fact that the victims were children. In the case of the Juvenile Re-Education Institute against Paraguay, a matter before the Inter-American Court, the court itself, I will not go into much detail, but this is highlighted on page 24 of our report, where the court indicated the state's supreme duty to protect a child's right to life and humane treatment. The state's response to the mental, physical, and medical condition of the girls at Armadale and at other institutions is again a serious violation of its international obligations, relating one to children in conflict with the law who have been deprived of their liberty, the protection of persons with mental illness, and persons with HIV/AIDS. As illustrated by Mrs. Goff, 90% of the girls had severe mental conditions, and that is just at Armadale. There are also reports of other wards in the care of the state with severe mental conditions which are not treated. In light of the inhumane conditions at Armadale, it is also not inconceivable that the state in fact contributed to the deterioration of the mental health of the wards. The horrific conditions highlighted in which the girls lived, with the knowledge of state officials, constituted a further grave violation of the right to humane treatment, illustrated again by evidence as to the use of, buckets to use as a toilet by the girls at night. The Commission itself, in fact, in its preliminary observations following the visit to Jamaica, made note of conditions as it related to children, more particularly on page 7 of the report. According to information received by the Commission, the Jamaican government's childcare system suffers from disturbing levels of sexual, physical, and mental abuse of children at the hands of caregivers, and urgently requires reforms and additional resources. Further, the Commission stated that the juveniles are held in overcrowded centers and are mixed with adults. Further, that the duration of punishment, as we saw with lockdown, which was for over a month in this particular case, was also of great concern to the Commission after its site visit to Jamaica. And it must also be noted that the fact that all the girls, despite the fact that only some of them had committed disciplinary infractions, all the girls would be collective punishment, which is another violation of international obligations. In light of the foregoing, we urge that the Commission will endorse the recommendations as set out in our report, most notably in addition to those in our 2006 report, we urge the Commission to include information and critical statements made during this hearing in your country report on Jamaica due in 2010, also to include in your annual report for 2009 in the chapter on children's rights the precise recommendations you make to the state. Further, that you strongly encourage the state to enact measures within its childcare system to ensure compliance with its responsibilities and obligations under the relevant conventions and guidelines. Further, we urge that the Commission will ask the state to carry out a public act of acknowledgement of international responsibility for the Armadale tragedy, issue new state policies on the matter of children in conflict with the law that fully comports with Jamaica's international obligations, and present through high-ranking state officials in a public ceremony wherein Jamaica's responsibility for the substandard detention conditions at Armadale is acknowledged. In concluding, the Armadale tragedy highlighted in this report is a marker of how desperately Jamaica's childcare system is in need of substantial and swift reform. It is hoped that the Commission will adopt the recommendations urged in this report to ensure that Jamaica will effect the necessary changes in relation to its childcare system in line with international standards and obligations. Thank you.
Thanks for your presentation, and now I will give the floor to a state for 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. In addressing you and your members this morning, my presentation will take the following format, in that we will discuss generally what the state has done to comply with its international obligation and what it continues to do in compliance with its international obligations. We will also, much has been said in relation to the Armadale tragedy, which we acknowledge. And as I had prefaced in my earlier submissions before you, the government does not feel it is appropriate to get into the actual facts and present submissions based on evidence which is still being distilled by a commission of inquiry. But we will demonstrate what we have done in the aftermath of the Armadale inquiry. That is, what steps we have taken to mitigate some of the incidents which have arisen as a result of, which have come to public knowledge as a result of that particular tragedy. Now, Jamaica, I must say at the outset, is fully committed to the international conventions that it has acceded to in relation to the rights of the child, namely the American Convention on Human Rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And as a demonstration for its commitment, Jamaica has enacted the Child Care and Protection Act 2004, and out of that, two critical agencies have been established, namely the Office of Children's Advocate as well as the Child Development Agency. Now, as regards the specifics of the petition being presented by Jamaicans for justice, we do not come here this morning in an antagonistic manner and to controvert or to complement what Jamaicans for Justice has said. We come here to show and demonstrate how well-intentioned the state is, what general steps have been taken in compliance with the relevant convention, and within the context of a developing country and limited resources, how we are making progress as regards the implementation of those particular steps. Now, some of the steps taken, commissioners, are in relation to the issue of child abuse. Through the Office of the Children's Advocate, Jamaica has been able to launch investigations into complaints of child abuse, and we are making steady progress in that persons have been convicted before the courts. Departmental inquiries are held, persons are found. Where persons are found liable, then they are dismissed, suspended without pay as the punishment warrants. Investigations on a criminal nature are being conducted by the Department of Public Prosecutions, and there has been certainly one conviction emanating from this new culture which is being developed, because hitherto it is my understanding that these things were suppressed, they hardly came to the fore, but with a new culture emerging, there is more transparency, and as a consequence of that, what was in the dark is now being brought to light and people are being prosecuted. This manifests, as I said, an intention on part of the state to comply with its international obligations and to ensure